God cares deeply for the poor and vulnerable among us. In fact, he cares so much that when he put together the Old Testament law, he put all kinds of regulations to protect the poor and vulnerable among his chosen people. For example, when you read Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 7 through 11, it says this: If among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within your land that the Lord your God has given you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient to his need, whatever it may be. Take care, lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, The seventh year, the year of release is near, and your eye looks grudgingly on your poor brother, and you will give him nothing, and he cries to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Now, this last part here, this probably requires some explanation because most of us aren't totally familiar with what he's talking about with the seventh year. You see, back with ancient Israel, God instituted a 7-year period for the cancellation of all debts. If you were sold into slavery to pay off your debt, in the seventh year you were freed from slavery. And if you had taken out a loan with someone and you had not paid it back by the seventh year, the remainder of the loan was forgiven. And this was a 7-year cyclical cycle for the people. So it wasn't like if you got a loan, you got 7 years to pay it back, because you might get your loan in year 5 out of 7, and then you've got 2 years to pay it back. And so what he was talking about was this. He could see how when the new cycle started, the Israelites would very freely be willing to lend money to each other because they knew they had up to 7 years to get it back. But if you get toward year 5 and year 6, you could see how people would be a lot less likely to lend money to someone who was poor or in a difficult situation because they'd be afraid that I might not get all the money back. And so God's saying, don't let that deter you. Lend when your brother has a need, even if you're getting close to the time when all debts are canceled. And then he goes on to say in verse 10, You shall give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give to him. Because for this the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all that you undertake. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. You catch that part? There will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore, I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy, and to the poor in your land. God expects his people to provide for the poor among them. In fact, God commands his people to provide for the poor among them. But he doesn't just give them this general command. He gives them specific practical commands as well. Commands like we see in Leviticus 19 and 23, where it says, Do not harvest the edge of your field. Or commands like we see in Leviticus 19, Leviticus 23, and Deuteronomy 24, where he talks about not going back and picking up anything you missed when you harvest your fields. So stop and imagine for a minute what this must have been like. You prepare your fields and vineyards, you plant your crops, you prune your vines and watch over your crops. Eventually, it's harvest time. You and your workers finally get to take in the food you work so hard to grow. You do one pass through your land, but you can't take anything from the perimeter of your property. The food is right there, ready to be harvested. It's on your land, but you're not allowed to have it. And you look back over portions of your land that you harvested. There's still grain standing that was missed. There's other grain that's simply laying on the ground that got dropped sometime during the process. There's still grapes on the vine. There's still olives that didn't get picked off the olive tree. And there are more grapes and olives that have fallen on the ground. It's your food, but you are not allowed to go back and touch it. You have to leave it there. Why? So that people who put zero effort into helping grow your crops can walk onto your property and take your food, and they don't have to pay you a penny. They can do what you're not allowed to do on your land with your food. This food God has set aside for the poor. So who comes up with crazy rules like this anyway? Well, the answer is God does. This is one of the ways that God wanted the poor to be provided for. And all of a sudden you realize it's not really your land. It's God's land. He's just loaning it to you to tend and care for. You're not the one that made the crops grow or the grapevines bud. God did. And it's not your food. It's God's food. He gives most of it to you, but he sets some aside for the poor. And notice he doesn't distinguish between people who are poor because they're lazy, or people who are poor because they're wasteful, or people that are poor because they're bad with money, or people that are poor because they're facing unexpected, difficult circumstances and they just need to get back on their feet again. People that are poor for any and every reason can go on God's land and take some of God's food. You simply get the privilege of being a part of the process. But that's not all. There's even more specific commands out there for caring for the poor. In Deuteronomy 14 and Deuteronomy 26, it talks about how every 3 years you have to tithe your produce. That means 1 out of every 10 apples, 1 out of every 10 figs, 1 out of every 10 grapes and olives. It's given to the ministry workers. Those are the Levites. They're kind of the equivalent now of like what a ministry worker, a church staff member would be today. So you give to the ministry workers and to the poor and vulnerable among you. That's what the tithe is. And this is over and above the financial tithe you give every year. So now you're tithing every year, but every 3 years is not just enough to tithe your money, you're tithing your produce as well. And he talks about when Israelites lend to fellow Israelites, lend without interest. You're not allowed to charge interest to a fellow Israelite because God doesn't want his people profiting off of lending money to the poor. And he also tells them to the poor, don't sell your food at a profit. So if someone has come to you to buy food and they don't have a lot of money, they're poor, they're really in bad shape, you're supposed to sell it to them at cost. You're not supposed to make a profit off the poor among you. Now, that doesn't mean you can't sell your food at a profit anywhere, just to those that are poor and vulnerable that are in need. You see, God expects his people to care for the poor. But this isn't just an Old Testament concept. Jesus taught about care for the poor as well. And his earliest followers took his teaching to heart. Look at what James has to say. James was Jesus' half brother. And James has to say this in chapter 2, verses 14 through 17. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. You see, genuine faith is always accompanied by action. And then the early church in Jerusalem, they got this too. After Jesus had gone to be with the Father and the church started to spread in Jerusalem, we read this in Acts chapter 4, verses 30 through 35. It says, there was not a needy person among them. Let me just say that again, so you can catch the significance of this. There was not a needy person among them. For as many as were owners of land or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold and laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. Now, this is radical obedience to caring for the poor. And that group of early believers, they helped change the world. Now, for those of us that call Community Church our home, as a group of people committed to becoming more like Jesus and less like ourselves, we want Jesus' heart for the poor to become our heart for the poor. We want Jesus' heart for the poor to become our heart for the poor. And that is why our church is looking to partner with the Northeast Social Action Program, otherwise known as NESAP. They've been serving the poor among us for over 40 years now. They know the needs of our community, and they're very good at helping meet those needs. And some of you might be very familiar with NESAP. Some of you may have even received assistance from them at some point in time. Others of you are probably not. That's why we've invited Sandy Wilhide to speak today at church and tell us a little bit more about NESAP and what they do and how they serve the community. Now, program note, at this point, I don't have what Sandy said to our church. You see, our church, there's sound audio issues. So when I record the messages, I have to record them back at home afterward in my home office. And so I don't have access to Sandy to have what she said, but I can give you a little bit of a summary of what she told us NESAP does. One of the biggest things NESAP does is they have a food pantry and they provide meals to families. And these meals consist of uh, boxed and canned goods. They also have produce that's donated from a local farm, and they also have meat that's donated to them from the Westminster Rescue Mission. And so when people come there to get groceries, they get bags and bags of groceries, and it's not quite enough to get them through a month, but it's enough to get them like most of the way through a month. And they said and they come once a month to get the groceries. And they said the reason they do it that way is because they know these families, they're networked with other food banks in the area, and they know these families go to the other food banks as well. So they know they're getting full coverage for the food that they need. And so they do the meals for these families. Another thing they do is they provide financial assistance for those who need it. So people will come to NESAP with an electric bill they can't pay or a rent bill they can't pay, and they'll help out with financial assistance for them as well. Now, in the financial assistance program, they have a one-page application they need to fill out to qualify, and they just give a little bit of basic information. They need a little bit of homework, such as like their annual income, things like that. And then they fill it out, they give it to them, and then NESAP will, if they are helping, they'll cut the check to the electrical utility, or they'll cut the check to the landlord and help to pay. And they have limits for how much they'll do for a person in a given year, but they help out with financial assistance. So, and when you go to the NESAP thrift store, which is located here in Hampstead, uh, anything you buy at the thrift store, that money goes toward their financial assistance program. And so our church realizes that we've got limited things we can do, and we have limited knowledge and understanding of the poor in our community and how to best serve them. But we have an organization right here that is very well versed in it, has processes and procedures in place to make things go well and smoothly. And so we want to partner with them and let them be our hands and feet into the community, helping them. And this isn't unique to us. There's actually a lot of churches in the area that when someone comes to them for financial assistance, they direct them to NESAP because NESAP was kind of started with that idea in mind that, hey, here's a place we can send the poor in our community to that will specialize in helping them and can help meet their needs. And so our church has chosen to partner with NESAP. And we've also chosen today at service to take up a special collection for them as well. And so there'll be a basket in the back that is specifically for donations to NESAP, and you can put donations back there. And then when Sandy leaves today, we're going to cut her a check for the amount of the donations. So we're very pleased to have NESAP as a partner and really excited to be able to work with them to help meet the needs of the poor in our community.